A lot of sellers I talk to are very apprehensive of posting, and there are lots of reasons for this, but usually it goes along the lines of, hey, I think that's something for my CEO to do. They're the thought leader. What do I have to say? Which I think is untrue, but that's one line of reasoning. Another line of reasoning is something along the lines of it's going to be perceived as cringe. What are my friends going to think about me, et cetera, et cetera. And the third is, hey, it's maybe that's marketing's responsibility. Like it's LinkedIn, it's social media. I don't have to take care of that. And I think all of these are largely untrue. And if you say that to yourself, you're just leaving a lot of money on the table effectively. So to throw some stats at you, only about depending on industry, about 20% of your buyers can be reached by cold call. 80% of them can't. They just simply won't pick up the phone, including myself. And then that means that 80% of your buyers, you need to be reaching them via email or via something like LinkedIn. The second stat, which is interesting, is like you already know this, but it's very hard to get a hold of somebody via cold email. The average executive or decision maker gets about 120 cold emails per day. A lot of them are just going to be sent directly to trash, especially if they don't recognize your name. And so when you're faced with these kinds of odds, you're kind of like left wondering, okay, like what do I do? And I think that's where LinkedIn comes in. And there's a lot you can do in terms of connecting and DMing and commenting as you follow this course. But honestly, the thing that's going to accelerate everything for you is posting. And so what I encourage you to do is kind of like bite the bullet and get into it. It's not only going to be good for you in terms of building pipeline or nurturing deals, it's also going to be good for your career. It is a valuable skill set that every future employer is going to look at and be like, hey, this person knows how to influence people and build relationships and build their own pipeline independent of any sort of infrastructure I give them. That's valuable, and I want that on my team. So that's something for you to think about. For example, my background is not in sales. I was a product manager, I was an engineer, and now a founder, and I had to learn sales. And I have had a lot of people help me with that. And now we generate over 64% of our pipeline, both inbound and outbound via LinkedIn. I am as effective, if not more effective, than a lot of BDRs on our team in terms of generating pipeline. And I don't pick up the phone. I don't cold call. I don't send very many emails. It's all via LinkedIn. And I've seen a lot of reps, not just founders, do this. And I think you can do it too. The other thing to think about is it doesn't take a lot of time. I think a lot of people kind of get stuck up on like, oh yeah, like this is going to take up way too much time. If you think about it, an hour of dialing, like, I don't know, you make 20 dials, you might not even connect with anybody. Maybe you can book up one meeting if you're really lucky. Same thing, if you have an hour of emailing, you can write maybe 5 to 6 personalized emails, and maybe if you're lucky, you get a meeting. An hour of time spent on LinkedIn, and honestly, you don't have to spend more than 2 or 3 hours a week, gets you, especially with posting, gets you so much high quality communication with your network. And if you curate your network to be mostly buyers, you're going and connecting with them, etc., you're able to get thousands of impressions with these buyers, maybe, and let's say like some of it's junk impressions with non-buyers. You're still going to get hundreds of impressions with buyers, and they're going to see your stuff. They're going to think of you. They're going to think that you're more than a transactional salesperson, but somebody who's thoughtful and can educate, which improves their opinion of you and builds trust, which makes everything else in this equation a lot easier. And then you can use that to hopefully like you get an inbound maybe, if the timing is right and the messaging is really clear. So you start generating pipeline for yourself inbound. People just DM you and say like, hey, can I take a meeting? Or they might go to your site directly and then book a meeting. And then under inbound, they say like, heard about you from your name, in which case you should get credit. And then the second thing is it makes outbound much easier, as we've discussed already. So I think there's a lot of value to posting in terms of building familiarity, building trust, and generating your own inbound pipeline, as well as increasing your ability to do outbound very effectively. And it doesn't take a lot of time compared to like the other channels you have access to. So highly, highly encourage you to post. If you don't, with this whole social selling thing, you're just leaving a lot on the table.
So if I went back in time and I needed to like convince my CEO or like talk to another sales leader about why should you post on LinkedIn or why should you get your team active on LinkedIn. The way that I would think about it and the way that I personally think about it now is like, if you need to grow a certain amount and the things that you're currently doing won't get you there, like cold email, cold calls, whatever, are not going to be sufficient next year to hit your revenue plan, or like not without doing a way more activity that just makes all the channels that are already working less and less well, less and less effective. Like if you make more calls, you don't necessarily get a higher connect rate. If you send more emails, you certainly make your response rates worse. LinkedIn, for a very small amount of effort, you can touch a very high number of prospects, ideal customer prospects, in a very small amount of time, right? LinkedIn is a very high impact, high ROI, high pipe gen activity, especially for the amount of time that it takes. Look, think about like 30 minutes of time or 60 minutes of time spent on each of these channels. Like 60 minutes of email time is like the equivalent to like 6 personalized emails, or like 2 connections and like 0 booked meetings, or like 400 post impressions, 15 new connections, and like 3 successful DM. Like the 1 hour spent on each is like, I truly think way more valuable on LinkedIn than anything else. The relationships that you're establishing, the awareness of your brand that you're establishing is higher quality awareness. So yeah, I think just when you compare like apples to apples, a minute spent on LinkedIn versus a minute spent on calling or emailing, I think the case is very easy to make that it's more valuable to spend the time on LinkedIn because you're just, higher quality touches on a much higher number of people for your time.